Hello guys, this is your Uncle Big Fish, and on this video we'll be doing some guide for stats and attributes and what it does. And we'll be comprising 4 different aspects, which will be the first one, talking about attributes and what they do. Secondly, we'll be talking about elements and what they do. Thirdly, we'll talk about stats and what they do. And for the last bit, we'll talk about how everything combined creates a build for your class. Let's get started. So, on this part, we'll talk about what every attack stat does. On this very first one, we have attack. Attack is your primary multiplier for damage, and every single thing in your damage output calculation will be affected by attack. This is going to give you your base damage. Next will be critical hit. In most other MMORPG games, this is called, well, critical chance or critical rate. However, in Dragon Nest, it's called critical hit. And for me, I have 33.7%, which means that for every chance of me hitting, I have a 33.7% chance to crit. Now, what is crit? And how much damage does a critical hit do? Well, there's a second part, which will be critical damage. So, once critical hit procs, critical damage will be the bonus damage multiplier done to whatever that skill does, or whatever the normal attack does. And it's going to basically amplify the damage by 182% for me, because I have 820 stat on this one only. However, critical damage will only matter if critical hits proc. Now, the last one's going to be final damage. This is going to be a final percentage of your total damage output. So, the way things work is attack plus your elemental attack multiplied by critical damage when critical hits proc, which will then be amplified by final damage as the last modifier. This will then be reduced by an enemy's defense and their damage reduction. This will pretty much be how damage works in this game. Next, I want to talk about what attributes do, because this is one of the things that a lot of people have been asking. So for power, agility, and intelligence, what do they do exactly? Well, today we'll talk about that, and that's going to be skill amplification. Now, this one will be primarily done from 2 things, which will be your skill scaling, and the last one's going to be your build, which we'll be talking about after this. Now, Justice Crash is a good example of what I want to actually explain. Justice Crash, on its base form, scales from power. However, when you go to water build, it changes to agi. And a lot of other skills in the game have this same difference. So you can check on your class first and look at the very bottom if it does change. Now, the way this thing works is a particular skill will always have 1 primary scaling and 2 secondary scalings. The first scaling on this one will be from agi, which will give 27.11% of skill bonus. And it only gives 13.5 on each intelligence and power combined. So you have both 27.11% and 13.5 respectively for power and intelligence. However, the scaling will always be driven towards 1 primary scaling. In my case, it's going to be agi. Now, this will increase full damage output. This thing increases as bonus damage. So even though you scale from only agility for the most part, you do get bonus damage from power and intelligence as well. However, the percentage will be much lower than agi. As you can see here, power gives 13.5, intelligence respectively, whilst agility gives 27.11%. Pretty much double. So whatever your agility gives you, power and intelligence will give half, but combined will be pretty much the same. And this is pretty much how it works. Now, the last thing I want to talk about will be how does attributes go into your build. Now, for every 2 points of power, you get 1 point of critical hit. For every 2 points of agility, you'll get 1 critical damage. And from 1 to intelligence, you get 1 final damage. So for every single stat of power, agility, and intelligence, you will get 1 respective one for each of the 3 stats, which will be critical hit, damage, and final damage. Power affecting critical hit, agility affecting critical damage, and intelligence affecting final damage. Next, let's talk about what does physique do. Physique is basically a stat that governs HP, and what does it do is it gives you a percentage of your base HP as bonus HP. So if you see here on my health, I have 420,000 HP. If you look at this, my base HP is 194,000. However, because I have 1,169 HP, nice number by the way, so I get a bonus of 117% of my HP bonus. Now, what does this do? What this does is, this increases your base HP. Now, in my case, this is going to give me 117% of my base HP. So to put it into calculation, it's quite simple. For every one physique, it will affect your HP by a percentage. So for every 1,000 physique, you will get 100% of your bonus HP. So how much just one physique does is pretty obvious. Okay? So for every 1,000 physique, you will get 100% of your HP as bonus HP. So when there's 100 physique, it means you get 10% bonus HP. So for every 1 physique, for every 10 physique, you get 1% of your base HP. And that's pretty much how it works. So you do need a lot of physique if you want to have a bulky character with a lot of HP. Now, let's talk about the last bit before we end this video, which will be how to build a class. Now, how to build a class, you first need to understand what do you want your class to do. What do you want your class to do? Well, there's going to be 3 different builds that I want to talk about. The first one being a DPS build. Now, a DPS build will be mainly focused on dealing damage, and there are 2 ways to do that. For now, due to the limitations of most contents, we cannot focus on all 3 stats, but we can focus on splitting 2 or focusing on 1. For me, I'm focusing on 1 on just critical hit, but there will be other builds as well. Now, the first one's gonna be a critical hit plus critical damage build. So, as you can see, you're gonna be investing on pretty much a lot of critical hit and investing some on critical damage. However, this in my opinion is gonna be a bit of an issue because critical damage doesn't scale very well. And to understand what that does is, you need to understand how critical damage works. And that's the fact that critical damage actually only scale of per 100 of critical damage, you only get around 1% of your damage multiplier. So critical damage base value is 100. And because I have 820, I get 82.8% extra of my critical damage. So if you're gonna have, say, 1000 critical damage, you're gonna get 200% of your bonus damage as critical damage. However, this pales in comparison on how critical hits scale. So I have 1685 critical hit, and this gives me a 33.7% chance to crit. By investing more on critical hit, you enable yourself to crit more often. And although you might be dealing less damage by investing more on critical hit compared to critical damage per critical procs, because critical hit will proc more often if you invest more on the chance, the total damage output will be much better because you crit more often. Now, the second build I want to talk about will be a critical hit final damage build. This one's going to be pretty much an investment of critical hit and final damage. Now, the way this works is, You will be investing primarily in critical hit, split between critical hit and final damage. Final damage will increase the total base damage of every single skill in the game, including your normal attacks. So what it does is, it will calculate a bonus damage after the crit. So after the crit, you will get a bonus damage from that critical hit. So this thing will actually be a lot stronger. However, due to the lack of critical damage investment, you'll be missing out on a lot of actual damage. But it'll be much more consistent because you'll be dealing a lot of damage more consistently. You won't be dealing crazy amount of damage in a single go, but you'll be dealing a lot of damage in a very consistent manner. And this is, in my opinion, a very, very strong way of looking into things, because consistency is often the thing that is the best, because consistency means you can control how much damage you're actually dealing instead of wishing on luck to save your ass. And this is actually one of my favorite builds. Critical hit plus final damage is a very strong combination as well. So this is going to be pretty much a critical hit build. You're going to go either critical hit, max investment, plus some critical damage, or you can split critical hit with final damage. Those are the two builds. The third one's going to be something quite special, and that's going to be a pure final damage build. Now, this one's primarily going to be better for classes and skills that scale of intelligence, because intelligence by itself, as I've said before, gives you final damage. So if you have a lot of intelligence, you'll have a lot of final damage as well. And this is very important going forwards. This pure final damage build will be 100% no luck. It will be dealing a lot of damage every single time. And I think that this is very strong. However, not every class can play that way, because this kind of style means that you need to have a class that consistently hits fast and hits hard. And there are only 3 classes, in my opinion, that can fit into this category, which will be 1. The artillery, 2. The sniper, and 3. Guess what? Yes, it's gonna be the elementalist. So this is actually one of the things that's very difficult to do. The Inquisitor might be able to do the same, however, because it's more of an AoE base, final damage is not very useful. Instead, you probably want to get critical hits instead, so you crit more in those DOTs or damage over time spells. And instead, this will be much better on a burst type, because final damage is calculated much more by percentage if you deal a lot of damage in one go. Say like, it's a lot better for you to do 100 damage in one go and get final damage for all of that, compared to you hitting 20, 20, 20, 20, and getting final damage for each of them, because then the value will be less in the long run. Plus, the chance for crit on 100% will be much stronger than just doing like 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. Next one will be the last bit, and that's going to be talking about pets and what they do. Now, for pets, you need to understand what every single pet does. Now, every single pet has their own stats, guys. Every single one has their own stats. Now, if you see here, I have a couple examples. This is going to be an Apocalypse Effigy. Now, if you look at my skills, you will see here my stats and what they do. Now, this Apocalypse Effigy is going to be a power base. As you can see here, the power stat is much higher than agility and intelligence, and it gives critical hit. Now, this is the best case scenario because power gives critical hit, and critical hit bonus means that this thing has double scaling for critical hit, which explains why my critical hit stat is very high. Now, the second one is going to be talking about healing. Now, for healing stats, you want to primarily focus on one class and one class only, which is going to be the Saint. Now, what does a Saint do? The Saint heals. Now, how does healing work, and what affects healing? Now, what affects healing is going to be first going to be your attack. Yes, you heal for a percentage of your attack, so you do need a lot of attack to make it work. But healing is mostly affected by 2 things. One is going to be your intelligence. Your intelligence stat will affect how much you heal. And lastly will be your elemental bonus. So if you want to scale as a healer, make sure to have a lot of intelligence, because a lot of intelligence comes a long way when it comes to how much you're capable of healing in one go. Next, let's talk about the very last one, which is going to be a tank build. Now, this tank build will revolve around basically 3 things, and it's probably as you expected. You're going to be going for element bonuses, just so your damage don't get too messed up. You want to invest in physique and defense plus HP. Now, the way this game works is, defenses don't actually scale that well compared to HP. HP is often much better when it comes to tanking, because of the fact that HP simply goes further away, and defenses don't really help that much, given that monsters hit you for very, very high damage. So what you want to do instead is, you want to focus more on HP and some on your defenses. However, this is not the biggest case in the world. You can focus a lot more on defenses if you're fighting against lower tier monsters. However, HP will take a much higher turn because it scales better compared to defense. And that is pretty much it for this video. I hope that you guys understand what I'm saying today, and you guys learned something new. If you liked the video and you learned something new today, don't forget to like the video and maybe subscribe if you want to. If you don't want to, it's fine. And I'm going back to bed because I am sick. Alright. I hope that you guys have a good day. And that's it for me. Bye.